right on time. Delighted to welcome you to today's event on enabling the EU hydrogen economy, specifically looking into how to make it happen. This is, of course, a very important and timely discussion given the Fit for 55 package, the Repower EU plan, the current geopolitical context, and of course our efforts to boost innovation, sustainability, and speed up actions now. The event is hosted by MEP Ms. Maria Spyraki and is kindly co-organized by Yara. So before we start, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you once again for your active involvement. Before we start, also just some housekeeping rules, specifically as we want to have a discussion as interactive as possible. I would like to invite our audience to send us your questions during the event. For that, you can use the Q&As box of the platform that should appear at the right-hand side of your screen. In doing so, please make sure to also choose all panelists option and to note the speaker to whom your question is best addressed so that we can facilitate a fruitful discussion. For on-site participants, of course, during the Q&A session, you can raise your hand and we'll take as many questions as possible as they come. Last but not least, I'd like to let you know that the event is recorded and the video will be made available as of tomorrow. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. And with no further ado, I'd like to provide the floor to Ms. Spyraki for her opening remarks.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for participating to this event, and I would like to ask for your understanding for the few minutes delay due to my obligatory parliamentary work on the RED IV. We are on the negotiation, and I think that sometimes it takes more than the time we have already arranged. So, given my commitment on the topic of hydrogen, I believe that hydrogen is the key tool to decarbonize the European energy sector and also to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors. And over the last 2 years, requirements to meet climate targets, as you all know, have been intensified. And targets for scale-up in the production and application of this energy sector have been increased in scope and accelerated in urgency as the EU hardly looks to break away from fossil fuels above all, and particularly from Russian fossil fuels dependency following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. In addition to tightening the climate targets, hydrogen has emerged as a promising climate-neutral energy carrier, especially since over the 1.5 years, more than 25 countries have published hydrogen roadmaps. However, reducing greenhouse gas emission necessitates a fundamental shift from the current energy system, which depends on fossil fuels, to renewable energy system. And hydrogen is a promising energy carrier to provide sustainable energy use worldwide. I hear myself twice, if it's possible. Thank you. And hydrogen is also increasingly being presented as an energy source, and it's also a solution to current energy supply crisis. But however, hydrogen is not only an energy source. According to my opinion, and I think that's why we are here all together, hydrogen can be developed into a global commodity as it can be seen as a puzzle to a fully decarbonized economy. And in this regard, we have a lot of obstacles to overcome. As European Commission President von der Leyen stated at the State of the Union in our plenary in Strasbourg last September, almost one month ago, hydrogen production derived from natural gas requires vast amount of electricity for sources. According to the International Environment Agency, Europe is the leading electrolyzer capacity deployment with 40% of global installed capacity, and the global capacity of electrolyzers that are needed to produce hydrogen from electricity doubled over the 5 years to reach just 300 megawatts by mid-2021. Around 350 projects were under development during 2022 to upgrade global capacity to 54 gigawatts by 2030. And additionally, another 40 projects accounting for more than 35 gigawatts of capacity were in the same year in the early stage of development. If all these projects are realized, if all these projects could be materialized, the global hydrogen supplies from electrolyzers could reach more than 8 megatons by 2030. For hydrogen to be renewable, all this electricity must come from renewable energy sources, and it is the key to have green hydrogen Today, Europe's grid are nearly all deeply dependent on fossil fuels and the way we produce energy coming from fossil fuels. So grid-connected electricity-hungry electrolyzers will increase emissions and electricity base load demand in most locations. That is the demand for non-variable sources like coal, like gas, like nuclear energy. However, there are also good news concerning the prospects of hydrogen. Hydrogen can be used in several applications today. Although there is still a small share of total hydrogen demand, recent progress in expanding its reach has been strong, particularly in transport. Specifically, there are 3 areas of hydrogen-related technologies which you are all familiar, but I would like just to repeat it because they are very good placed in the energy market. It is the hydrogen injection to the natural gas pipeline networks. It is also the alternative fuel production based on hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And finally, it is the fusion of hydrogen in transportation. One of the most important challenges facing hydrogen technology development is the production of alternative fuel combustion solutions on engines. And here it comes to my competence as well as the shadow rapporteur of the alternative fuels for the maritime sector in the ENVI committee, and also remind you that ammonia and hydrogen fuels have advantage and disadvantage, but their mixture has good compatibility, and I think this is the case that we are now facing. The good compatibility that we have between the ammonia and the hydrogen fuels. Ammonia can be an excellent carrier for hydrogen storage, first of all, lowering the cost of hydrogen storage and transportation with good combustion qualities. And of course, in addition, these alternative fuels participate in combustion as primary or secondary fuels, reducing carbon dioxide emission, which is one of our first priorities. However, the current ammonia-hydrogen mixture combustion, spark ignition or compression ignition, and has certain limitation on large bore marine engines. It is one of the obstacles that we have to overcome. In conclusion, I would like to point out that the support to hydrogen market we need, it must be under clear and stable rules in order to provide certainty, in order to provide sustainability and predictability to potential investors. And without clear and transparent rule for the hydrogen market, I would like to point out it, such as additionality with renewables and fossil fuels, we will not have the desired scaling up at electrolysis at the EU level. And the case that we need to address is how to scale up our production in terms of hydrogen and in terms of alternative fuels at the EU level. On the contrary, we will have short-term negative consequences, as we all can understand and imagine. So we need to create a stable market to support this kind of energy source when leading to a discussion like the one we have today about building a hydrogen economy, because this is finally the point that we would like all to contribute. And once again, thank you very much for being here today. My apologies once again for the delay for a few minutes, and I'm happy to join the discussion and also to join the event's closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Spyraki, for setting the scene with regards to the key role of hydrogen, challenges and opportunities, but also where we need to take action now, looking ahead. I'm very happy on this note to introduce you to panelists that are with us today. So specifically, we have Ms. Kitty Nitrai, Head of C2 Unit on Decarbonization and Sustainability of Energy Sources from DG Energy, the European Commission, Mr. Magnus Ankarstrand, President of Yara Clean Ammonia, Mr. Geert de Kock, Electricity and Energy Manager from Transport and Environment, Dr. Cor Lehout, Energy and Fuels Manager and Team Leader in Delft University, and Ms. Yelda Gavan, Director for Policy at ExxonMobil. And for those of you that have previewed a slightly modified version of the agenda, I would like to let you know that we'll see the last-minute cancellation, but given the expressed interest of Yelda, we're very happy to still provide for Esfelka multi-stakeholder approach, so thank you very much for that. So, kicking off the panel discussion, I would like to turn to Ms. Nitrai from DG Energy and ask you whether you believe that renewable energy targets are the right tool to enable renewables uptake in the EU, and specifically, how can we make them fit for purpose?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm always happy to come to have to debate in the Temple of European Democracy about all the relevant energy topics. I'm very happy to be here. Maybe before I answer the question, just to say that I think it's very important to know that hydrogen is a very important way to decarbonize sectors which so far did not have any solutions. But hydrogen is not a tool in itself. It's not a goal in itself. So it is a solution for many, many issues, but it's not a goal in itself. And I think that's a very important starting point also to explain the philosophy behind many of the proposals that we have made in the Fit for 55 context. Now, coming back to the question, indeed, and going back a bit to the logic of the hydrogen strategy that we adopted in 2020, we said that we would need three things for a hydrogen market to materialize. One was to scale up demand and supply in parallel. So this is also a coordination question. You need the pull factors from the demand side, and you need the push factors to help the production to take off. So we need to do this in parallel, in a coordinated manner, so that it all fits. We need, and Ms. Spiraki already said it, and I will repeat it, very much agreeing, we need clarity about the regulatory framework. We need a stable regulatory framework that can allow investors to know what's happening in 2 years' time, what's happening in 10 years' time, so that investment decisions can be made taking out any regulatory risks. And the third element, which I would like to insist, is the development of infrastructures. And the more we see it, the more we need also flexibility infrastructures, so storages that will help to bridge the demand between supply and for hydrogen. So we need these three elements. So coming back to the specific question, the renewable energy targets are actually just one element out of this framework, but we need the whole framework to work together. So what we have done with the Renewable Energy Directive, with our proposal, is that we have proposed targets, specific, what we call renewable fuels of non-biological origin, where hydrogen under specific targets for RFNBOs in those sectors where we feel hydrogen is the key solution, and that's in industry, where in line with our strategy, we ask to replace within those industries that already use hydrogen and that will be using hydrogen, the gray hydrogen through renewable hydrogen. So increasingly replace the gray hydrogen through renewable hydrogen and to eventually fully replace it in the longer term, but at least until 2030 to replace half of it. And we propose, as also Ms. Spiraki already said, the transport sector. For the transport sector, we propose RFNBO targets, so hydrogen targets, in order to push or pull hydrogen into those sectors, such as especially aviation and the maritime sector. And if necessary, it can also work in the heavy-duty vehicle sectors, but especially in the aviation and in the maritime sectors to really pull in the new solution, the new technological solutions that help us to decarbonize these very, very difficult sectors. And indeed, it works together with other legislative acts like the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, of course, of regulation now. It was a directive, now it's a regulation, and also the refuel proposals, especially the refuel aviation proposals. So we feel that in this framework, these targets are particularly important for really creating these pull factors. We often get the question, and this is to conclude the first reply of mine, is why just these two sectors? Why didn't we put a target, for example, on heating and cooling? And the reason for that is that we did not want to put technology-specific or renewable technology-specific targets for those sectors where we feel that different technologies can well compete. So in the heating sector is happily one sector where there are different options. There is, of course, electrification, there is district heating, so there are many very efficient options where we hope that they can compete together, and the consumer should be empowered to pick the option that works best for themselves. So there we refrain from putting forward technology-specific targets. But we feel that with this, we can kickstart the market and direct the hydrogen or incentivize the hydrogen in those sectors where it makes most sense.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nitrai, for your key input and for your intervention and being with us today. I think your intervention was something that we've all been very much looking forward to. And naturally, I'd like to follow up and ask you, of course, to some extent, this is very well covered within your reply, but I wanted to follow up and ask you what will be the main actions of DD Energy or the European Commission when it comes to ensure the new hydrogen targets are met.
So for the new hydrogen targets, well, first of all, we support as much as we can the co-legislators to reach an as quick as possible agreement on those targets. So we really deploy all our availability to support the negotiations, to provide data analysis, so that those targets can remain ambitious and can be then part of the final framework. But at the same time, it's not just the targets, because in the Repower EU communications, we have put forward some non-legislative actions that we are working on. And for example, if we come to the side of the infrastructures, I mean, we have already a legal basis, and that's the Trans-European Energy Infrastructures Regulation Framework. But within that framework, we also try to really promote the development of the key hydrogen corridors that we will need throughout the EU. So really work with all relevant stakeholders to identify those infrastructures that will be needed also in the longer term for a hydrogen market to function effectively. So develop these corridors that we've mentioned in the communication. We are also very much working on the financing side as well. So we have already announced in the hydrogen strategy, and also, of course, there we still need the legislation to be finalized, agreed by the co-legislators. But we have been speaking about the contracts for differences, so or the carbon contracts for differences for the production or the use of hydrogen, of renewable hydrogen. So we are, together with colleagues from DG Klima, and they're in the lead, we are working very intensively on this framework to be able to put it forward as soon as the legislation is adopted, so as to really help also the uptake of hydrogen financially, because we know that renewable hydrogen in an initial phase will be more expensive than its competitors. So we need a legal basis of the Innovation Fund. We need this fund to be well endowed with sufficient allowances, so that sufficient funds can be dedicated to this. We have also increased the research funding dedicated to hydrogen, and of course, as our president announced a few weeks ago, exactly, we are now intensively working to set up a hydrogen bank, which is not a bank, just to say. The name is a bank, but it's as we would say in more boring Euro language, would be a facility in order to really help also to ramp up the market for hydrogen, renewable hydrogen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nitrai, for this very insightful reply. And seamlessly, I would like to turn to Magnus and ask you, well, you're president of Yara Clean Ammonia, and Yara has been doing some excellent work there. But I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, how do you think we can boost demand for clean hydrogen in the European Union?
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to come here to speak today. I mean, we, as Yara, we are a big ammonia producer, ammonia and fertilizer producer, which also means that we are a big hydrogen producer today. And ammonia has the ability that it is a clean fuel. It doesn't emit CO2 when you burn it, so it can be used just as hydrogen for instance, as a shipping fuel. And the advantage of ammonia is that it contains 3 hydrogen atoms, 1 nitrogen atoms, but it also contains 50% more energy per volume unit than hydrogen, which means that, you know, it's particularly relevant for the shipping industry, as an example. And you only need to cool it down to minus 33 degrees as opposed to minus 250 degrees. So, you know, it has a lot of properties that makes it very, very interesting. But maybe most importantly, for ammonia is that the infrastructure is there today. I mean, we know how to ship it, we know how to handle it. From a hydrogen perspective, particularly if you can't use pipelines, is non-existing today. So the big question is, you know, how do we boost demand, particularly in the new segments? Today it's the fertilizer industry and then the petrochemical industry predominantly that uses ammonia. So how do we get, you know, the shipping industry, how do you get ammonia used into power production where that makes sense, and so on. And I think, you know, the simple answer in terms of is we need to scale it up, right? We are doing our first projects now, both within blue ammonia, which is, you know, really necessary as well to get this going, and green ammonia, with our sort of flagship project in Norway to convert our plant into green ammonia from gray ammonia with electrolyzers. But those are two projects, and in order to reach the targets that we talked about, you need to scale this up dramatically. And to scale it up dramatically, you need a market, because that's the only way you can get this going. It is a significant value chain that needs to be developed, even for ammonia, where a lot of things is in place already, let alone hydrogen, where nothing is really in place today. It's a huge value chain that needs to be developed in parallel, huge investments, and you need clarity. So there needs to be a demand for the product, because no demand, no market. And I think in its simplest form, what we need is that the price of emitting CO2 needs to be there. It needs to make sense for the customer to use ammonia and hydrogen as opposed to the fossil fuel alternative. And here I think this is where Europe has done really, really well with ETS, and you're miles ahead of the rest of the world. But unfortunately, ETS is not enough to close the gap. You need a significant higher amount in terms of CO2 tax, and it has to be predictable, right? Because ETS is by nature it's a trading scheme, so it's difficult to predict exactly what it will be. And to mention one example, in the Netherlands, they have through their regulation a CO2 tax plan aiming at a certain level, I believe around 130 euros by 2032, and that enables our blue hydrogen ammonia project in the Netherlands. It's as easy as that. But you have to have very clear, transparent pricing signals in the market, because unfortunately, politicians cannot regulate a full scale up of the market. Eventually, any country will run out of money. You cannot subsidize every single project from here till forever. So you need to create that market part. So I think and that's as I mentioned, the significant benefit in Europe that we have the tools, or at least the sort of ETS as a starting point, which is important, but it needs to be increased, and it needs to be much more predictable in terms of what will be, in order to make the business cases work. And then I think the other part is also on the supply side, is that there's also a limit to how much you can increase pricing, right? And today, when it comes to blue hydrogen, blue ammonia, and CCS, I mean, we can get today 90% plus CO2 reduction from hydrogen production through CCS, with technology that exists and is close to affordable. In terms of green hydrogen, green ammonia, the technology is simply not there today. A lot of exciting things is happening in the electrolyzer industry, but you have to keep in mind that the electrolyzer industry today produces hydrogen fueling stations, 1 megawatt installations, right? And the 300 megawatts that we grew to in 2021, that's roughly half of what we need for our single project in Norway. So that's the entire production capacity in Europe. We twice of that for one project. So there's significant development that needs to happen there as well. And to make that happen, there needs to be also incentives on the production side. I mean, CapEx incentives through the EU Innovation Fund and other tools and mechanisms are helpful in that, but we also have to think about how do we scale that up, because there is a long journey there to go before particularly green hydrogen becomes competitive from a cost perspective. And we also have to keep in mind that you need renewable electricity for all of that production. And unfortunately, the hydrogen industry and the ammonia industry is not the only one who wants that electricity. But I think if you have the right combination of clear and transparent incentives on the demand side, i.e. taxes, and if you have clear incentives on the production side, and there's different ways of doing that, I think the market will scale up. I have no doubt about that, because it will make sense for investors, and then the projects will come.
Thank you very much, Magnus, for your reply. And looking for inspiration, if you could also tell us what are the critical success factors for Yara's project on green and blue hydrogen globally, and what is specifically, perhaps on the other hand side, holding you back?
Yeah, no, I mean, to follow up on the market side, we take a bet on the market. We think that the market will be there. So that's a risk that we take, right? We could be wrong, but okay, you have to take some risk in order to, particularly as an existing producer like we are. So we believe that, the price, the customers will be willing to pay quite a lot more for green and blue ammonia than what they did for gray ammonia. I think the other, on the success factor side, it depends a little bit on the type of project. But I think when it comes to blue ammonia, blue hydrogen, technology is so advanced that to a large extent the amount of support you need is fairly limited. And to a large extent, the existing, like for instance, I mentioned the Dutch scheme, it's enough to support those type of projects. On the green side, it's very simple. You need to know that you have 24/7 supply of renewable electricity, and you need significant support in order to bridge the gap between what customers are willing to pay, even with a carbon tax, and what it costs to produce it. And that, of course, will over time bring the cost of electrolyzers down and bring it to a cost parity like we've seen in other industries.
Thank you very much, Magnus. And seamlessly, I would like to transition to Mr. Geert de Kok, Electricity and Energy Manager at Transport and Environment. And of course, looking into the Transport and Environment positions and press releases, it's evident that we need to move ahead fast, and targets are not ambitious enough. So I wanted to ask you, why does Transport and Environment focus on ammonia as a shipping fuel, and what is, in your view, also slowing things down when it comes to challenges?
Well, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the question. Just before I sort of dive in on ammonia as a fuel, I think I'd like to first maybe pan out a bit and look at whether the other options. I think we've tried crop-based biofuels. It's disastrous. It's a very inefficient way of producing energy. It pushes deforestation, and so we do not support them. And I think we've hit the end of the road on crop-based biofuels, and we should phase them out as soon as possible. Advanced biofuels made from waste and residues, we're fully in support. We also know that waste is limited. There's a lot of competing uses for waste, so we don't think advanced biofuels are going to revolutionize or transport is a very big energy sector. We will not meet the full demand. I think in the red, we're now looking at 1.75, 2.2% of transport energy. So, it's a contribution, but it's limited. For shipping, electrification, obviously, I don't need to go into detail. It's not really an option. Battery electric container ships are not in the future. So then we come to all types of liquid fuels made from electrolysis with renewable energy. And we're not saying that ammonia is the only option, but we think ammonia has some really good cards to play. There's e-methanol, there's liquid hydrogen. But yeah, we think ammonia, when we do the analysis, we think that the cheapest fuel and sort of the e-fuel, electrofuel in the next decade will be ammonia. I think it has largely to do with the fact that you don't need a carbon element. So you have the Haber-Bosch synthesis, and it's a mature technology, and that is something that can be, that is mature, and so obviously there's an advantage there. As Magnus flagged, there's obviously synergies with the fertilizer industry, so there is already a lot of ammonia production. There's already a push for replacing gray hydrogen in the industry, so we can piggyback on that. There's storage available in ports around the world, so obviously shipping is an international sector, so if you have storage sites around the world, that's not the case with liquid hydrogen. So again, ammonia is well placed there. Safe handling procedures, we know how to handle ammonia. It's been done for years, decades. So that's also something that is sorted. It can be co-combusted with heavy fuel oil in ships. And the associated NOx emissions, we've looked at that. With selective catalytic reduction technology, you can also reduce the NOx emissions from co-combusting. And longer term, we also see this ammonia being used in fuel cells. So this is why we think ammonia is not the only option, but it has some very good cards to play, and this is why we support it, having looked and explored all the other options.
Thank you very much, Geert. And concerning the second half of the question, do you see any challenges in slowing things down?
Well, I think, well, we should start yesterday. I mean, this is also why we really focus at the Brussels level, because we feel at the international global level at IMO, but also for the shipping sector, through the International Maritime Organization, ICAO for the civil aviation sector, there's not enough action. So the EU needs to play a leading role in this, and so this is why we need to start tackling this. The transport sector is Europe's biggest climate problem. I think it has the highest share of emissions in the overall economy. So we've had Dieselgate, we've had an explosive growth in aviation, we have SUVs negating the efficiency gains in combustion engine technology. So, it's a huge issue, and, there's been many delays for many years, and so it's time to get a handle on this. We have 220 million cars in Europe, so if you don't phase out the combustion engine by 2035, there will be a huge stock still remaining in 2050. So, and similar for ships, planes, these are long-living assets, so we need to start now. And also, I think it was flagged earlier, you need a massive deployment of renewable electricity to produce the additional renewable electricity to make the hydrogen. So this is something that is a major issue, and so we still have to make progress on decarbonizing the grid. What we don't want is a dirty grid and clean hydrogen. So this is something where we really want to push the envelope a bit. The targets that are set by the Commission, we welcome them. They're very high, they're very ambitious, that's good. But we also know that it's, if you don't produce some of the challenges, I think, are around, for example, speeding up the deployment of renewables, so the permitting. So to achieve those targets, we will have to deploy a lot more renewables very rapidly. And I think this is the crux of the issue, and this is what we need, and what we should have started with yesterday. So I think this is some of the challenges we face. I think in terms of what is needed for hydrogen, I think it was mentioned, I think, by every speaker, we need clear rules. So that is this infamous delegated act on RFMBOs. And we need to make sure that, hydrogen is produced with additional renewables, and where and when they are available. So this is something where we emphasize it. So that is on the sort of supply side. We want to support hydrogen very strongly, the e-fuels, ammonia, in shipping, but we want to make sure that these fuels are actually close to zero carbon. And so for the transport sector, I think we're looking at, I think Kitty already mentioned supply and demand. I think on the demand side, we want e-kerosene targets, ambitious e-kerosene targets for aviation, and we want an e-fuel shipping mandate for these ship operators to really start using these fuels. Because again, repeating what others may have said already, CO2 prices are not enough to bridge the cost gap between the fossil fuel and the renewable e-fuels. So this is where we really think we really need to push fuel suppliers to put those e-fuels on the market, and that is what is needed. And then on the demand side, we need to make sure that those hard-to-abate sectors have to start using these fuels. Lots more that can be said, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Geert, and I've very well noted we should start yesterday. I think is already a great quote for the event's key takeaways. So thank you for highlighting that. And now I would like to turn to Cor for a quick, perhaps facts check and feasibility check, because you have looked at a specific country, the Netherlands. So I was wondering how feasible you think it is to reach the target by 2030.
Well, it's quite, thank you for the invitation to start with. The Netherlands, to start with, is the second largest industrial hydrogen user in Europe, just behind Germany. So it's not just a small country. In terms of hydrogen use, we are rather big, which means also that a target of 50% RFMBOs for industry is also quite a high target. We investigated, is it possible to reach it in 2030? So not just is it feasible, but in 2030. And we found out it is feasible, but only at, we called it the lower variant. That is only looking at the current industrial use, and not include decarbonized hydrogen, and not plants from Tata Steel, for example, which enhances the industrial hydrogen use in the Netherlands. If you add that into the target, it's just, well, really not feasible. The other thing, it is feasible, the lower variant we call it, we also included there the RFNBO target for transport. It is also takes into account part of the green hydrogen. And then time is not our friend. And that means you have to have clarity on the rules as soon as possible. And then there is demand, so that will attract the investments needed on the supply side. And then we have to build additional electricity production, mainly offshore wind. We have to build the hydrogen pipelines. We have to build the additional high voltage lines. We have to build the storage. And all these are in plans, they are on schedules, but they all have to be there in concerted action to be ready at the 1st of January in 2030 and not at the 31st of December. It's a target for 2000. So we have only calculated, we have only 7 years. So time is not our friend. It is possible, but a little bit more time might be necessary, which I do not say just leave the target. I think it's a good target. But maybe in the Netherlands, we just need some more time to deliver it.
Thank you very much, Cor, and it's really this ambition and vision, I think, that is pushing us forward. But I was also wondering if you would see also any main hurdles there at EU level.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, the first one is time. The second one is time. The third one is time also. That means also you have to have clear rules as soon as possible. So the delay in the delegated act from the RED2 is not helping there. Then the other hurdle is enough renewable electricity. If you want to produce green hydrogen, you have to produce renewable electricity. And there are also other demands for that already in the Netherlands, for electrification of transport, electrification of industry, electrification of the built environment. And we have to have more renewable electricity to deliver the hydrogen target, which takes time again. We also found out you cannot do this, the target for the Netherlands specifically, without large amounts of import. We want to build our own industry, but you also need import. And import needs also the upstream part of it, which takes time also. And then in the end, there are the costs. But the cost sums we made in the report, we delivered are, well, at the moment, it's due to the energy crisis, the high prices for renewable natural gas, I have to say that, well, we have to make the calculations again. Maybe you can comment on that. What at the moment is the competitive edge for hydrogen from renewable electricity compared to hydrogen with SMRs of ATRs from natural gas. I think at the moment with current natural gas prices, green hydrogen might be competitive. But then in the end, you don't have it yet, which brings us back to the first point, time.
Thank you very much, Cor, and I have noted time, costs, clear rules, and enough renewable electricity. And actually, now that we're mentioning electricity, I'd like to give a fresh plot twist to the agenda and turn to Ms. Kitty Nitrai from the European Commission, as I was thinking that, well, the switch from fossil-based to green hydrogen involves electrification of industry, but aren't we just as much short of electricity as we are short of gas?
Thank you very much, and absolutely, indeed, I think it's been underlined already how much electricity will be needed for everything, not just for hydrogen. So, and that's where we started also in 2020, the energy system integration strategy. We have already highlighted that electricity will be the main fuel for 2050. So electricity will be responsible for more than half of the energy mix, the final energy mix. So it will play an increasing role, and it will play, so, and of course, luckily it's the electricity sector that is the quickest to decarbonize. So that's also the sector where we have the highest share of renewables. And that's also what drives the electrification of emissions also in the other sectors. So electricity will be of choice or the energy source or energy carrier of choice for many other sectors as well. And that's why additionality is so important, because we have our current electricity system that is not yet decarbonized. So it's more or less decarbonized to different extents across different countries. But we need to, first of all, decarbonize also our current electricity mix. At the same time, we are increasing the electricity use. So even with all the efficiencies, we are increasing our electricity use because we will use more electricity in the transport sector for electric vehicles, which are finally now picking up quickly, more quicker maybe than expected, or not as quick as others would have wished, but at least it started picking up. We start seeing the limits of the grid as well, but electricity will be consumed additionally, so more electricity will be consumed by these sectors. Industry electrification will also require new electricity sources. And on top of that comes also the hydrogen production. So we will have a current electricity mix that we need to decarbonize, plus add a lot more renewable electricity in order to meet the electricity demand of the incoming sectors. So that's why we really need to do everything in our power to drive that process. Well, the good news are that, of course, renewable electricity costs have come down spectacularly. So they have come down much quicker, not much, but a bit quicker than industry was hoping for. So renewable electricity installations have reached grid parity in various renewable electricity technologies in various parts of Europe. So that makes, of course, an easier business case also for renewable electricity. Again, there what we need is for clear and stable rules. We need maybe more power purchase agreements, renewable power purchase agreements, a developing market there, where we see encouraging signals. But of course, it was already mentioned, we need to speed up the construction of this. So we need the permitting rules. And there we, of course, very much hope that the proposal that we have made with the Repower EU can also come quickly through the co-legislative process so that we can simplify the rules. We are not, and it's important to underline, not circumventing any environmental protection rules. That we are not doing. What we're doing is trying to streamline, trying to front load all these processes so that they will be done for a certain amount of projects and not for every project singularly, so that they can then, once these environmental assessments are done, the project can then just go and be installed, for example, when it comes to the go-to zones. So that's what we hope that can help in speeding up renewable electricity installations in the EU, so that they can be then available for the decarbonization, for mobility, for electrification of heating or buildings, for electrification of industry, and for hydrogen production.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nitrai, for your reply. And I think it would be of great interest to also hear from Ms. Yelda Gavan, specifically on how do you see the future role of hydrogen in the energy sector, and from your company's point of view, where you see the greatest opportunities there.
Thank you, Elias. It's great to be here today, and the disadvantage of being the last speaker, but also the advantage. I wrote down great quotes from all of the speakers. I'm going to read them to you to see if you like them. Timing is not our friend. Should have started yesterday. We don't want dirty electricity grid and clean hydrogen. We need predictability. We need imports. And the quickest to decarbonize is the electricity sector, while we need more electricity at the same time. So these sums it up very, very nicely for me. I think, well, first of all, my company, ExxonMobil, we take this very seriously. We established a whole new business last year in 2021 to help decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors. So it's called Low Carbon Solutions. I represent that company. We are growing in Europe, growing in Asia Pac, and of course, we're very busy in the US. We're concentrating on carbon capture, storage, and hydrogen, and low-emission fuels at the same time. Specifically hydrogen, which is today's topic. We're actively looking at both green and blue hydrogen. So let me share some good news that we got from the US yesterday. We announced a new project where we're going to help decarbonize a major industry. It's called CF Industries. They're a big producer of both nitrogen and sorry, I just got the news today, so they're a big player of both nitrogen and hydrogen, and we're basically going to help them decarbonize. So we will take the carbon and we will do carbon capture storage. It's going to be about 2 million tons per year, but it's our first carbon offtake agreement. So this is moving forward. It's a real contract, and we just announced it yesterday. And this is one item I want to bring to this panel. In the private sector, we look at capital as an international commodity. So the capital will go wherever you find the best business climate. So you probably know recently in the US, they passed a law called the Inflation Reduction Act, and it created a huge incentive both for CCS and hydrogen. So 45Q, 45V is providing a lot of incentives, not only for CCS, not only for blue hydrogen, but also green hydrogen in the US. So that brings me to the question, how do you move hydrogen? Because wouldn't it be great if we need imports in Europe and we could bring some of this incentivized and cost-advantaged hydrogen into Europe? So I think we need to work on that together. We think it's going to be hard because we talked about how expensive it is to move hydrogen. You have to spend a lot of money on liquefaction, on compression. We talked about ammonia. Yes, we agree. It's going to create a lot of opportunities, but we think we need to spend more time working on ammonia to make it cheaper so we can move it around. The other policy support we need, I think Madame Spiraki, you talked about blending. Absolutely, we need that, because if you're producing hydrogen, you can start to immediately make money to put hydrogen in the grid, and that actually is not an incentive, but it's it helps you. It helps your investment immediately, but also you help decarbonize the actual natural gas grid immediately, which is what we all want, right? So these are all the additional support we need. Let me mention a couple of other hydrogen investments we have. We're looking at an investment in Norway right now, and it's a standalone green hydrogen project in Slagen. And you talked about the marine sector, for example, green ammonia and green hydrogen. It's in a really neat location where there's a lot of marine industry. So we're trying to see if we can use green hydrogen to decarbonize the marine industry and in that particular part of Norway. So we're doing an MOU, we're doing a study, so we're very excited about that. In Southampton in the UK, we're trying to create a blue hydrogen hub with other investors. And of course, we're a part of the H-Vision study in the Netherlands. And also in Baytown in the US, we're going to produce blue hydrogen, and it's going to reduce significant emissions from that facility. So my message is, let's work on all of these together. I think we have to be colorblind when it comes to hydrogen. We need all types of hydrogen. We need green, blue, pink, and I keep hearing about new colors every day, but we need them all. If we want to scale up hydrogen, we need all types of hydrogen, because it's going to be very, very challenging to get to net zero without scaling up the entire hydrogen market.
Thank you very much, Ms. Calvin. And perhaps as a quick follow-up, taking into consideration the fact that we are 10 minutes late in terms of today's event, I was just wondering, how shall we ensure that there's a level playing field between renewable hydrogen versus non-sustainable alternatives?
That's where the colorblind technology neutrality comes in. You may be familiar with the Hydrogen for Europe study, which was supported by IOGP, and that was their big message. You need to be technology neutral. But what does it actually mean to be technology neutral? So it all comes down to funding. If we need obviously incentives in the sector, because we all talked about the costs, and if it doesn't make sense, the international capital will not invest there. So we need that support, and in the funding decisions, we really need to be technology neutral.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cavan, and thanks a lot, of course, to all excellent panelists for today's discussion, for joining us today in the European Parliament. On this note, I think looking into the agenda of today's discussion, there is a short video message intervention of MEP Mr. Christophe Grudel that we can showcase to our audience in the room and online with the kind help of technicians in the Parliament. Indeed, it seems to be an issue.
Dear MEPS Spiraki, dear colleague, dear all, thank you very much for the Intergroup for inviting me to this compelling event today on the future of the EU hydrogen economy. I am sorry not to be present. Recording the short video was very important for me, so I can reiterate my deepest commitment to make clean hydrogen work in Europe. It has been 3 years that the European Commission officially launched its clean hydrogen strategy as part of the EU Green Deal. Our economy needs to be carbon neutral by 2050 through the increase of electrification and the phase out of fossil sources. This is why fossil-free hydrogen will play a crucial role in a fully integrated energy system. Hydrogen has been in the European energy discussions for years. We are finally having the outcome of our hard work with successes of multiple initiatives. The Alliance, the IPCEI list, the state aid guidelines, the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, called RED, and finally, the revision of the gas market. Last September, President Ursula von der Leyen went even more ambitious for the sector with historic announcements. I'm thinking of the launch of the European Bank for Hydrogen, investing 3 billion euros. I fully welcome this decision, which will really enable us to kickstart the EU market with locally produced molecules. As Shadow Rapporteur for Renew Europe on the Renewable Energy Directive, I would like to stop a moment on the deployment of the renewable hydrogen market, which are jeopardized. I am very much satisfied with the overall position of the Parliament, which include for the ambitions, innovation, hydrogen, and flexibility. However, I have 2 great concerns. First of all, the direct inclusion of new criteria for RFNBOs in RED III. We are now close to have found a compromise on the delegated act after 2 years of negotiation. The new criteria weakens the negotiations process if it does not require to start it over again. We all agree that industry needs investment security and quickly. Everyone around the table agrees with it. Second concerns, renewable hydrogen alongside low carbon electrolytic hydrogen need to be produced in a sustainable manner and at a domestic level. We need to trust our industries' capacity by investing first in Europe and not on international projects. This statement goes as well for the hydrogen bank. The money needs to be invested on domestic production. I strongly believe that import should not be an option A nor B for Europe. Let's not make this any more difficult for Europe by setting strategies and targets for imports. The historical gas shock and the outrageous war in Ukraine show us how fundamental Europe needs to strengthen its strategic autonomy. Repower EU will help with getting rid of Russian gas. We need to use the impulse to go even further. This event gathers key stakeholders, from decision makers to international groups and NGOs. It is a perfect opportunity to call for clean and local hydrogen production. We need it now, so let's roll up our sleeves even more higher to make this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to MEP Mr. Grudler and his team for sending us this video message. This was the voice of MEP Mr. Christoph Grudler. I hope online participants had the chance to see the video as well, because there were some technical problems in the room. But in any case, the video will be made available tomorrow on the website of the European Parliament Intergroup as well. I'm well aware of the fact that we are running late, so thank you very much, Ms. Spiraki, for your kind flexibility. On this note, I'm practically following your lead here, so perhaps before your closing remarks, we would take one or two burning questions from the audience. Indeed. So this is up to you.
Thank you once again. We are at your disposal for answering maybe, but not more, because we have only less than 5 minutes to conclude with the questions, and then to give you some kind of takeoff in order to keep them with you. Please, is anyone, and please introduce yourself. Thank you.
There we go. Yes. Thank you very much, François Paquet from the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition. One comment and then one question. One comment on blending. Interesting that we hear comments here to do blending when we look at the current market, where it's an easy shift, an easy win to shift from gray to other types of renewable hydrogen. Purity is a key thing. The market today is not asking for impure hydrogen. So I just wonder whether this is not a waste of scarce resources to do blending here. And when you look at the figures, putting 5% of hydrogen into the grid will only displace 1.6% of natural gas because of the difference of energy density. So you basically need more gas to respond to the same demand level, which is a bit of a problem here if we have to decarbonize the gas grid. That's for the comment. So I would be careful if we are to incentivize the first markets today, which are already existing, which are not asking for a blend, the gas, which is not delivering on the environment, it is going to cost more. Second point, second question then. Question for colleagues of Yara here. We face a situation where the economics of hydrogen have been turned on their heads, really. And you are among the ones who will really have to make the investments that will allow you to seize the economic opportunity, autonomy, and put you in a very competitive situation here. In the end, we have to invest in different types of hydrogen, either renewable or blue, just to name two. And we have none of them at the moment. No green, no blue. We have only gray. When you look at the cost, the planet dimension, but also the scale, it looks, I just wonder how all those considerations impact your investment decisions for the future and how you take these into account. Just one or two examples on those three dimensions. The planet. If we look at the CCS technologies today, We have 1, 2, 3 plants maximum in the world running, and they capture barely 50% of CO2. And I think it's a high number. We can, on paper, do much more. But the reality of today is that more than half of the CO2 is released into the atmosphere. So how do we go to the next step? We still have the methane leakage problem, which will not go away, even with CCS. That's for the planet, versus renewable hydrogen, zero emission produced in the production. The cost, even if you reduce by half the cost of CCS, the main element in blue hydrogen cost is gas. Even if you reduce by half the cost of CCS, you will reduce the cost of blue hydrogen by 10%. So how do you see the cost of natural gas today impacting your business investment tomorrow? And finally, if you want CCS and blue hydrogen to be cost competitive, you need to go scale. How is it impacting your investment decisions, knowing that going big scale is much riskier versus the modular approach of electrolysis? That's the question I had for you today.
Thank you. It was a long question. But it was a good question, but I'll try to answer as fast as I can. I think a lot of the statements you make are wrong, quite frankly. And I think we have to listen to science here and sort of physics. Energy markets are fundamentally supply driven. It's the access to energy that matters. It's the access to energy and the price of extracting that energy that set prices. It's not like iPad that you can sort of generate demand and more people like Apple, so they buy more. It's access to the energy that's important. And right now, renewable or so green hydrogen is not cost competitive compared to blue. Not at all. Not even in Europe, because when gas prices go up, electricity prices go up. And there is no electricity for green hydrogen at scale in Europe today. Let's face it. There's no capacity to build electrolyzers right now. It will come, I believe so, but it's not there today. There's no renewable electricity to feed it. And if you use it for hydrogen, you take it away from another user that can use electricity directly at the 40% efficiency loss, right? Because that's the efficiency loss of electrolyzers. There you lose 40% or more of the electricity put in when it comes out, right? So we need CCS, because CCS, when you store carbon underground, it doesn't emit, right? We've done that for 30 years on the Norwegian continental shelf, and it needs to be heavily regulated, and it is heavily regulated. And with the SMR or ATR in hydrogen production, you can today, for new installations, store more than 90% of the CO2. So I think, whereas it is extremely important, of course, to challenge that things are done right, and I fully agree with you that we have to account for methane leakages as well, particularly since that's probably the one area where Europe is competitive with the US, because the methane leakages of our gas is significantly lower than in the US, because it's been regulated for such a long time. But at the end of the day, the colors don't matter. What matters is the carbon footprint, including everything, of course, but the carbon footprint is what matters. And then half the footprint is better than a full footprint, even if there's still a footprint, right? So 90% is better than nothing. It's much, much better than nothing. And right now, if you look from an energy balance perspective, 90% blue hydrogen is much better for the environment than green hydrogen, because if you build an electrolyzer today with existing technology, you waste then 40% of electricity. What does that mean in Europe? You have to fire up a coal-fired plant to replace those 40%. So the carbon footprint of green hydrogen right now is much worse in Europe, in continental Europe, than the alternative. That's the beauty of our project in Norway, because the grid is already clean. So it doesn't matter in that context. I'm not saying that we should definitely develop green hydrogen, and why? Because we have to do it to get the efficiency up, and we have to get the cost down. And then we will eventually get green hydrogen at a level where it's truly clean and it's affordable. But we have to just realize how big that undertaking actually is. But thanks for the challenge.
And it was really interesting. I mean, and well, sorry for, yes, but very briefly, please, because we are running off time, and it is already 12:40.
Thank you, Maria Karagianidou Rosek from IOGP, International Oil and Gas Producers Association, because the cost of gas was mentioned several times. I just wanted to mention, to make a comment rather than a question. Yelda already mentioned one of the studies that Become sponsored, Hydrogen for Europe, that actually examines two scenarios. So renewables push scenario, where we look at the costs also associated with investments in the green hydrogen. And then another scenario where we have more diversified, technologically diversified approach, including blue hydrogen and other colors. We had done this study last year. It was done by Deloitte, so it's independent consultant. We updated this study this year to check the costs against the increased natural gas prices that are caused because of the war and because of the diversification of supplies from the Russian gas supplies. And even in this higher cost scenario, looking for the long-term perspectives, we have to see that in long term, there is enough gas in the market. In the global market, here we are talking mainly about North America, Australia, and Qatar, that can supply Europe. So in the 2-3 years time, the prices should go down to the level of $30 where they were before. So our study that looked really into hardcore data really had a very good assessment, and I encourage you to check it. It's online. Estimated that the investment needed for the renewables push scenario would be of amount of 650 billion higher than the technology diversified scenario. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Abel Enriquez from Enagas, the gas infrastructure operator in Spain. Comment and a question. A comment is about hydrogen blending. I'm fully support with ExxonMobil. It's fully needed, this technology. It's not only about decarbonization, it's also about enabling the scale up of hydrogen production, allowing electrolyzers to use the surplus of hydrogen production to inject into the gas grid and to use it as, sorry, as a transitional tool to move later on to a hydrogen network system. Sorry. My question is about the hydrogen market. 3 elements were identified before: to scale up production, the regulatory framework, and infrastructure. We have targets for production. We will have a good regulatory framework in a few months. But when it comes to infrastructure, I'm missing an infrastructure target. And this is the question I would like to put on the table, maybe for the Commission, but also for the other speakers. Is the gas hydrogen decarbonization package a good opportunity to put inside a hydrogen infrastructure target to replicate maybe the corridors which were identified in the REPowerEU plan? Thank you very much.
Kitty, it's your turn. Thank you.
Then I will be very quick because I'm separating you from lunch, I understand. If you need targets, you need to know exactly what you're doing. You need to know how to express this target, how to determine, and what's the right level. In order to set such infrastructure targets, I think we're just not there. We are trying to even map out the infrastructure corridors. One day, maybe we'll be there to have a vision to figure out what target would work. And that was, to some extent, what happened for electricity and gas. But today, anyone who would come forward with a market would be taking quite an uninformed bet.
Fully agreed. It's very premature. Let me say a few things in order to proceed with concluding remarks. First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here with us today. Physical presence is very important, and of course, after COVID, it's much more important. I would like to say a few things concerning, first of all, the overall approach on the whole picture, because it is important just to remind you that when it comes to RED III, which is the update of Renewable Energy Directive, we have set a very ambitious target, much more ambitious than the previous one before the Russia and Ukraine, to 45% of our mix in renewables by 2030. Which means that the Commission and the Member States are ready to proceed with the proper legislation in order to adapt to such very ambitious target. The second one is that we have also RED IV, which is an accelerator in terms of legislation to proceed with go-to areas in order to upgrade the level of production of renewable energy, which is, according to the Commission's opinion and also to my opinion and the stakeholders' opinion, the key to proceed to the hydrogen market. When it comes to the hydrogen market, the reality means that it is feasible to proceed with green hydrogen market without excluding any kind of other colors of hydrogen in this market, but it's also need to get some time more. And I note this coming from our colleague from DERF because it is important to understand that we have now a market test, economically speaking. And the case is that we have to have something which is feasible. And feasibility means that needs more time, needs also time in order to proceed with the technology that it is also valuable. And by saying this, I fully support the representative of Yara, president of Yara approach when it comes to CCS. CCS is one of the instruments that we have to use in order to decarbonize our economy, in order to increase our hydrogen production, in order finally to reach our target, which is a decarbonized economy by 2050. I would like to conclude by saying that we have, of course, to take into account that we have to increase the domestic production when it comes to hydrogen. It is important at the same time to have domestic production and the backbone infrastructure we need in order to finally have the proper green hydrogen by the end of the day. And of course, it is important to also to go hand in hand with the shipping, maritime and aviation sector in order to use the existing, I repeat, is the existing facilities that we have. One of them and one of the fuels that we have available is ammonia. It's not the only one, but only the experts and following the experts, as I noted coming from your part, from transport and environment, ammonia is a good card to play, and next decade belongs to ammonia. So I think that it is important to understand that there is no one way to go forward. But we have to go in terms of value chain, and we have to use all the available instruments. And from our part, we have to speed up. We have to speed up with RED 4. We are now to do our best. We are trying to do our best. I am the rapporteur on behalf of EPP in every committee, RED 3 and RED 4 now. So we are speeding up and we are trying to facilitate the Commission and the Member States to proceed with the trialogue. But I think that it is also important to provide the legal certainty when it comes to hydrogen production, when it comes to the potential infrastructure, including the important project of common interest. Once again, thank you very much for being here with us. It was very, very interesting. Thank you.